إذا كنت تريد أن تكون على مذهب السلف تعلم مذهب السلف.
He said that from the adab of the talib with his sheikh is that he doesn't precede the sheikh to explaining an issue or responding to a question, whether from the sheikh himself or from someone else. يعني منه أو من غيره ولا يساوقه فيه. Neither does he answer or respond at the same time as the sheikh. So he doesn't precede the sheikh, neither does he respond at the same time as the sheikh. So مثلا someone asks him a question about a hadith, and so when the sheikh is responding with the hadith, he recites the hadith at the same time. And so he answers at the same time as the sheikh. And just to show that the sheikh knows it and I know it as well. And that is something that is easy to fall into. Or he mentions an ayah, and as the sheikh starts the ayah, he recites the ayah with the sheikh same time. And mashallah, from those who were present from the Talab, he knew. And that is from bad adab with the sheikh. Rather, the sheikh, if he is asked, then he responds. And the talib remains silent. If he knows it, alhamdulillah. And if he doesn't know it, then he benefits. He mentions, except if ولا يظهر معرفته به. He doesn't make it apparent that he knows it as well. The talib, he remains humble, and that is from his sincerity. That as much as he knows and as much as he may be acquainted with what the sheikh is going to say and familiar, and that occurs of course with an individual who makes mulazama of Ahl al-Ilm. You'll find, ikhwan, after years of making mulazama with an alim from the ulama or a number of mashayikh, you become acquainted with how the sheikh is going to respond to this question. And you may possibly be acquainted with the exact evidence he's possibly going to use. Because of years of mulazama, you know when this issue comes up, the sheikh usually says such and such. And that is from the benefits of mulazama and clinging closely and tightly and spending time and years with the ulama. That you become acquainted with their ajwiba, with their responses. And thus, if it were that question were to arise again, you would be familiar with the fact that Sheikh such and such answers with this, and Sheikh such and such answers with this. You're familiar with the ajwiba and the responses of the Sheikh. But what you do not do is answer at the same time as the Sheikh, because that is from su'al adab with him, from bad manners with him. He mentions وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ لَا يَقْطَعْ عَلَى الشَّيْخِ كَلَامًا. Before he mentions that, he said, except that the Sheikh requests that from him. In that instance, then he responds. So, mathalan, an issue comes up and the Sheikh says, who respond? If the Sheikh makes a question or makes a statement like that, or he says, Yalla, Abdurrahman, ايش تقول? If he indicates, I'm not actually asking you. If he indicates, don't worry. If he indicates and then he requests from a particular talib to respond to the question, خلاص. He mentions if that occurs, لا بأس به. وينبغي أن لا يقطع على الشيخ كلامه. Similarly, from the adab, it is not befitting to cut the kalam of the sheikh. He is speaking, and in the middle of his speech, you fly and interrupt. But just a second, Sheikh, what about such and such? Or did you mention such and such? It's from bad adab, from su' al-akhlaq and su' al-adab, from the bad manners of the Talib Ilm with the Sheikh, that he interrupts the Sheikh. Rather, if he has an issue, if he has a query, he makes a note, and he waits until the Sheikh permits for questions, or permits for istifsarat, and seeking clarity. But as far as interrupting the Sheikh, in every few minutes you have an issue that comes to mind, you interrupt the Sheikh, you interrupt the dars, then that is from the su' or from bad manners, from the bad manners of the talib. وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ لَا يَقْطَعَ عَلَى الشَّيْخِ كَلَامًا. It is befitting that he does not, or it is not befitting that he cuts the kalam of the Sheikh. أو أي كلام كان regardless of what he's saying. Even if he's speaking of one of the affairs of the dunya, for example. So he's saying, and I saw in the newspaper this morning that such and such and such and such. And so he comes in. Also, it's in the Guardian that such and such and such. And he adds, you leave. La. Leave the sheikh. He's explaining the story. You let the sheikh finish. That is from the adab of the talib. He said, وَلَا يُسَابِقُهُ فِيهِ وَلَا يُسَابِقُهُ فِيهِ. He doesn't answer before him, neither does he harmonize his answer with the answer of the sheikh. Answer at the same time. He said, بَلْ يَصْبِرْ حَتَّى يَفْرُغَ الشَّيْخ كَلَامَهُ ثُمَّ يَتَكَلَّمْ. He said, rather he waits until the sheikh is finished, then he speaks. وَلَا يَتَحَدَّثْ مَعَ غَيْرِهِ وَالشَّيْخ يَتَحَدَّثْ مَعَهُ. And he does not speak to an individual while the sheikh is speaking to him, which is another bad adab with the sheikh. And so the sheikh is addressing someone, explaining the issue, for example, and then in comes the talib. What is sheikh trying to say? And so he begins to explain the kalam. The sheikh's present and is able to explain what the sheikh's trying to say, such and such. So he begins to explain to the one that the sheikh is addressing. Again, it is from the Su' al-Adab ma'a shaykh. He mentions, نعم, وليكن ذهنه حاضرا في كل وقت بحيث إذا أمره بشيء أو سأله عن شيء أو أشار إليه لم يهوجه إلى إعادته ثانيا بل يبادر إليه مسرعا. That is, that he must remain constantly present in heart and mind, to the extent that if he's commanded with something or he is asked, the sheikh asks him something or indicates to him, that he does not need to repeat his request. And so he is present and alert and attentive. And so if it is that the sheikh says, Mathalan, Abdurrahman, what was it that we said last week? He's not wandering or drifting or reflecting upon his work or his business or speaking to someone beside him. He's with the sheikh. So as soon as the sheikh is cognitive, he recognizes what the sheikh is saying, he's listening. If the sheikh asks him, he's ready. And that is, again, from the adab of the talib. بَلْ يُبَادِرْ إِلَيْهِ مُسْرِعًا. Rather, he hastens to him quickly. That is, he hastens to respond quickly to the request of the sheikh. The 12th adab